room downtime and flips, what should be expected when you harvest a room and the downtime between harvest and reloading it. This goes back to like the financial modeling you've done at the very beginning of your project. At some point in time, it was determined how much product you're going to grow per year in this facility. And it's probably broken down by quarter, by month, by week. You might be in a facility with 3 or 4 flower rooms and you're harvesting every 2 or 3 weeks with a gap after you rotate through the rooms to, get you on that 9-week cycle or 8-week cycle, just depending on who the operator is, what varieties they're running, and how their cultivation schedule is structured. I've gone into facilities where, it's an ownership group. They have no idea what they're doing. They just have the money. They got a license. They hired somebody that said they were a grower, and this person, like, bless their heart, like, they're probably a good cultivator, and we're a good cultivator at home in their tent or in their basement or their garage or whatever it is, but like they didn't have millions of dollars behind this that need production forecasting to be accurate. And they're spending, 10, 12 days between flips to get the room ready to reload it again. Part of that's on how fast and diligent they are at getting into the room and, cleaning the surfaces, vacuuming, sweeping, getting all the debris out, and then doing a wet clean and actually scrubbing and sanitizing all the surfaces, getting your HVAC filters changed, potentially running some hypochlorous through the room and fogging the room. And they're not realizing, like, well, the downtime of 10 days every 9 weeks, you're losing a full production cycle. Maybe that's millions of dollars in revenue, depending on the size of the facility. You're not meeting the obligation you have to the ownership group and the forecasted financial model based on having that downtime or being lazy or not having your veg schedule on track where you have a veg production round ready to reload that flower room that was just harvested within 24 to 48 hours. I think, at least the way I run facilities, no more than 48 hours will ever go by without being ready to reload. That means you have your veg schedule on track. You have the plants ready at the optimal size to go in and refill that flower space. You have your labor prioritized to get in and sanitize that room and have it completely ready to reset and reload within 48 hours. 24 to 48 hours is definitely the industry standard and norm at this point. Don't get me wrong, there's the scenarios where you might be doing a lighting upgrade and you have to spend a few extra days pulling down your HPS lights to throw in your LED lights. Maybe you're just replacing LED fixtures that are out, or maybe you're doing other novelty maintenance to the room and you need those extra days. You're going to plan for that at least 10 to 12 weeks ahead of time and know what your veg production schedule is going to look like to allocate for that extra downtime. Because the last thing you want to do is like prioritize that downtime in your flowering space to get things fixed or renovated or whatever it is, and then not change your veg cycle and now have plants that got an extra 10 days of veg. They're way too big going into flower. They're going to be way too tall and stretched out. They're going to be into the lights. Maybe it's a vertical system and a tiered system. Those types of grows are much more specific on the veg time based on the varieties they're putting in, based on having like a limited 5.5 foot height from the bench top to the lights underneath the second tier. Like you just can't put large plants in those, or else you're going to be like growing around the table into the second tier because your plants get so tall, and then you don't have the veg space for your clone production to be transplanted when it's rooted and ready to go. So 24 to 48 hours is your standard downtime. There should be no reason you can't achieve that with the right management in place. Typically, by the time 1/3 or a quarter of the room is harvested, you've got your team that's working on reaping the plants, getting them weighed, getting them on, maybe Z-racks to transfer to your dry room or whatever systems you use. Maybe it's bins or totes or carts, again, depending on the size of the operation. But once you get enough open space of harvested bench space, you can peel off a couple people that can now start sliding the pots to the front of the tables, running those pots, stacking them on a pallet or some sort of cart outside of the room, and start moving those into your greenway section. And you don't want to create a bottleneck where you're doing that too fast, and now there's downtime and they're waiting on plants to get reaped and more space to open up for them to continue cleaning. But if you manage the time appropriately and you have the right number of people removing trellis, chopping the plants out, weighing them and getting them to the dry room, and the correct amount of people working behind them to clean those, to start doing the first pass on those tables to get the pots out of the room, get the debris at least collected, centralized on the table. I'm not really a big fan of like doing too much sweeping and creating debris in the air while you still have plants that you're harvesting and moving out. So the best thing you can do is at least just get those pots moved, or rock wool cubes, whatever it may be. You can get your drippers folded out over the tables so they're just hanging on the edge, and the tables are now ready for the next stage. Once all the plants are harvested and moved into the dry room, the whole team, kind of all hands on deck, gets in there. You get the vacuums out, you get the remaining pots out, and you do what's called a dry clean. I call it a dry clean because you're not using any type of wet material. You're not using any water. You're not using any bleach, any soap, any scrub brushes, any pressure washers. You're just getting the debris and the material out of the room before you then come in on your second pass and do your bleach scrub, typically soaking the tables, scrubbing them down. Seen people waste a lot of money just using like Zerotol and stuff to clean table surfaces. And it's like, what's that, $50 a gallon? And bleach is like $3 a gallon. And you use like a 1 ounce per gallon dilution to get a really strong bleach solution on the table to sanitize. And then obviously go back through and do your rinse everything down with fresh water. Once your tables are sanitized, you typically have a lot of people now that are, wiping and sanitizing wall surfaces, unistrut rails, light rails, and hangers. If you're in a cocoa facility, over time, if you don't clean these surfaces above the table, they're just going to get built up with cocoa debris. And it's going to be that much harder to sanitize when you realize that you've neglected this for so long. So every harvest, you should get on any wipeable surface, every single wipeable surface, you should be trying to wipe off, vacuum, sanitize one way or another. I'm not saying, scrub your bulbs or anything like that, but like the reflectors and the frames of the lights, the uprights of your benches, the edges of your benches, the legs and posts, your trellis posts, all of that is part of the wet clean process. And then once you get all that down, you're down to the floor and you're getting underneath the benches, vacuuming, sweeping, doing whatever you need to do to get any type of debris vacuumed up. Then you're mopping and you're getting your bleach sanitation on your floor surfaces, and then kind of start working your way back out of the room. Make sure you pay attention to your drains, gutters, whatever drainage situations you have for your trays. Do not neglect them. Get in there, get the debris out of them. If there's algae built up, get some elbow grease going and scrub those down, get them sanitized. Get your drains. A lot of people are pouring bleach down the drains or putting like a chlorine tablet down your drains. There's a P-trap typically, and you want to be able to ensure like that section between the drain and that trap has some level of sanitation going on before you restart your next run in there. Really just attention to details to all of it. And you shouldn't really need anything other than pretty common cleaning materials, bleach, isopropyl alcohol, maybe some simple green, dish soap. I see a lot of people too, they'll come in maybe after the fact and do like a Zerotol fog and spray, mist the walls down, and then use like a dry mop to kind of wipe them down to dry them out. Again, these hypochlorous machines, the Nebula one, whatever hypochlorous atomizer you can use, people are fogging the rooms and allowing their HVAC systems to run and pull a low part per million of hypochlorous through the air ducts to sanitize the air ducts. Each facility is a little different just depending on the level of detail you have to get into and what other layers of cleanliness you have to provide during that room flip. But again, all that being said, you should be staffed appropriately where it's the very high focus of the week. You have the right amount of people to do all of these things, and within 48 hours have it done and be ready to reload.